There is a power within you. It lifts your life to the highest level. It brings success, companionship, health, happiness, and peace of mind. When you tap into this power, it responds to you because it is within you. And that's why spirituality rocks. Good evening. I'm Kathy Caputo, and I'm sitting in for Dr. Janine Burns tonight because she is speaking at the Gold Rush Women's Conference in Chicago. And I'm here with my friend, co-host, Karen Gigante. We're both staff ministers at the Center for Spiritual Living, Long Island in Hicksville, New York. And we have a very special guest for you tonight, Dr. Harry Morgan Moses. And we'll introduce him to you in just a few minutes. But first, I would like to tell you what we do at Spirituality Rocks. We always want to teach spirituality, new thought principles. And what we do here is we bring you nationally recognized guests, and they inspire and empower you to awaken that divine nature within you and expand your consciousness as you learn the different ways of mastering your life. And yes, you do have a divine nature. New Thought teaches that we have one ultimate, infinite principle, one energy, and that energy is God or Spirit or the higher power, whatever you feel comfortable calling it. And it's an intelligence that does not live outside of you, it lives within you. And it is always guiding you in everything that you do. So we are made of that inherent principle. We're made of that energy. And so we have all of its qualities already within us. So we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So New Thought also teaches that we co-create with God, that we do that by our thoughts and our beliefs, and they are responded back to us by that infinite loving universe, that abundant universe that we all live in. And we all have the ability to live the life that we want to live. And if we are experiencing something that we don't want to experience anymore, we have the ability to change it, to just turn it around. And so, Reverend Karen, one of the things that we talked about last week is that I was reading one of those books for dummies, even though I'm not a dummy, and it's about writing children's books, because that's something that I really want to do. And one of the things they tell you to do is to think like a child. And that's very easy for me. But one of the things I thought about is the imagination that a child has. They really live out loud, don't they, Karen?
They do.
And that's really like the lesson that you did a couple of weeks ago at the center, living out loud. They have no fear, and they can imagine anything that us grown-ups don't even think is possible. They'll think that they're having lunch with a Martian. They'll think they can be president at age 16. And they have that way of just imagining anything, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so what happens is as we get older, unfortunately, our imagination starts to go down a different road. We start imagining all the things that maybe can go wrong, things that could not happen. We'll start to worry about, am I going to lose my job? Is my child going to get sick? And we forget that everything is possible with God. We forget that what we are thinking about, what we're focusing on, we're starting to attract to ourselves. And that's why people don't understand why all of a sudden their life is going in the direction that they really don't want to go to. And it's even in the Bible, it says that to become as a child, not to be childish, but to be childlike, to go back to that imagination. So actually, children are a lot smarter than grown-ups, yes, aren't they?
They are.
So, I mean, you have 2 daughters, and I know that all of us, if we think back to our childhood, we can think about all the imagination and the things that we did on our imaginary journeys. Are your kids like that?
Yeah, they were when they were young. I'm hoping they still are, but as young children, they would dress themselves up, play dress up, become whatever it is they decided they were going to be that day. and really get into it and just feel that feeling. You know, that's part of imagination too, is really feeling that you are whatever it is you're pretending to be at that moment and imagining it and seeing it. And so children just do it naturally. They have no problem with it. Whereas adults, we get to that point, like you said, and we begin to think about all the reasons why something can't happen or something isn't possible.
Right.
And children don't have that. They just go. Yeah.
Yeah, if you watch a child in a playground, they're just all over the place.
Right.
It's really amazing. We go into our fear rather than staying in that faith of spirit and knowing that with God everything is possible. It was funny when I was thinking about going down a different road as we get older. I looked up in the Science of Mind textbook written by Dr. Ernest Holmes, who was an amazing New Thought teacher and wrote this fantastic book, The Science of Mind, something that we study all the time at the Center for Spiritual Living. And this is what he wrote. What we now experience, we may cease experiencing if we have the will and the imagination to set our vision on an opposite direction and hold it there. It is the office of the imagination to set the vision. The will should hold it in place until the creative genius of the inner life transforms the image of limitation and transmutes it into liberty under law, liberty under that creative medium that we all live in. So we all have the ability to change what's happening if we're experiencing something that we don't want to experience. And that's a power that we all have, and I love calling it a power, that we are able to use that power of spirit. And so right now, I think that's a great time to introduce our very special guest, Dr. Harry Morgan Moses, because he wrote this fantastic book called Obvious Power, 25 Habitudes That Shift Your Thought into Action. Dr. Harry is a spiritual director of Spirit Works Center for Spiritual Living in Burbank, California, as well as a nationally recognized author, speaker, and motivational corporate trainer. His message empowers people to achieve greater emotional health, success, and creativity by showing how shifts in attitude establish genuine fulfillment. And he's one of our favorite guests here on Spirituality Rocks. And if you want to find out a little bit more about him, because I can go on and on and on, you can go on to myspiritworks.com or newthought.com. As a matter of fact, Barbara, one of our very good friends, Barbara Grimminger, who's a practitioner at our center, sent Karen and me an email earlier today and just said, have fun tonight and don't flirt with Dr. Harry. But
which we have a habit of doing.
We are definitely going to flirt with you, Dr. Harry. So welcome. Please, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. We talk a lot on this show, and I talk pretty much everywhere in my life about New Thought stuff. And it's a conversation. My friend Mary Tumpkin, who left our plane of existence just last year, she used to say, that she was the doctor and the president of the UFBL, which was Johnny Coleman's organization. And she said, the thing about New Thought is there's actually something to know.
Yes, that's right. That's true.
Something very important to know.
Something very important to know.
You have to know about them in order to use them. That's how that works. I'm pleasure to be here, and I love talking about this. I think it is very much part of what the awakening world is all about. The awakening world is about people becoming conscious of their spiritual nature and actually coming up with a very simple proposition. If energy and matter are equal and interchangeable, then there's only one energy, and that energy must be in harmony with itself. Right. And if we start identifying ourselves with that energy, whether you call it God or spirit or energy, the new generation likes to actually call it energy. That's not the way energy works. I mean, they're referring to God when they talk that way. And when we learn how to use the laws of the universe, which is a spiritual universe, and when we learn how to use them and learn how to harmonize There's no limit to the good that we can have as human beings. No limit.
Absolutely. It's funny sometimes when I'm going down that slippery slope of not believing or thinking that something's going to be going wrong, I start to think that I am made out of spirit. How can anything go wrong with me if I know that at the center of my being, that I am always guided by that infinite intelligence that's within me? And it helps me, it really helps me to turn things around and go back in the other direction.
Well, I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's what Emerson's essay, Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay on self-reliance was about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we learn to trust that inner self,
yes.
then we become truly human.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an additional aspect to New Thought, which is to me mind-boggling, and it's the idea that the sunam bonum, the ultimate goal of God, is in you and in me. You know, that we call that the Atman, or the highest. The Hindu had called it the Atman. The Buddha called it the Buddha consciousness. You might call it Christ consciousness. We could call it the perfect pattern, the Alpha and Omega. There's a million words for it. But the idea is that the principle of the universe itself has the glory of itself. I mean, the absolute glory of itself. So basically the glory of God, whatever that is, it's hidden within you and within me. And the human mind goes, oh, well, that's crazy. We like this idea of a destination called heaven, where where's a place. Well, but it's not a place. It's a place in your awareness, and the creative process that you're immersed in, this creative life force that you're a part in, is taking shape according to your consciousness. And when you get the consciousness of being in the kingdom of heaven, and the way I define that is when everything is just right all the time. Right? Have you not had moments in your life where things were just right?
Absolutely. That's the synchronicity in life, those few moments.
What we know is if we had those moments, then it's potential to have them in a continuous string of events. Yes. And wouldn't that be the kingdom of heaven?
Yes, it would.
Everything is just right all the time. Now, here's the interesting part, because we in New Thought, in fact, two of my spiritual teachers along the way were engineers. I mean, mechanical engineers. We love to think in our head, and one of the things about New Thought and the law of New Thought says there is a law of mind, and the law of mind receives the direct impress of your thinking and acts upon it. Right? So we go, oh, well, an engineer goes, well, if water seeks its own level in accord with its own weight, then my consciousness creates one thing and it seeks the same thing in experience. Oh, my consciousness creates my experience. And they see the law in it. They see the principle in it, right? And the principle is so exciting. Now you take this other aspect that I just talked about, and the principle says that within each of us is the glory of life itself. Ooh, like the Big Bang and every reason that it happened, and everything there is to know about it, and everything there is to know about everything, all of that is in you. Well, our mind goes, oh, that's just fantasy thinking. But you see, that's where our mind is too small. The human brain is not equipped for that. It's too big a concept. The human brain can't handle it. However, the human heart can. Right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there comes something in this sort of affirmative thinking kind of awareness when you connect it back in to its relationship to the whole or to God or to spirit, that we begin to see that New Thought is a transformative way of living, and it takes you in to the very depths, at the very center of your being. And it's for sure a lifelong journey.
Yeah, it's for sure is right. That is for sure. And it's so empowering to be able to know these things.
And the more you participate with it, which is how I've been, I was ordained 25 years ago. And I started teaching as a practitioner in this stuff 30 years ago, right? So how could it keep sustaining me, and how could it be so interesting if it were finite, if you kept looking at it and seeing the same thing, right? It's like the sentence you just read, right? When you read that, when you first started to practice, you didn't understand it.
Right.
Now you read it, and it takes you into the depths of your own awareness, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So that's the transformation stuff that keeps going on when we start to realize that our habits and attitudes are building our world. Mm-hmm. They're not just something happening in a psychological process on the inside. They're actually building what is our experience in our world.
And you talk about that in your book, about the more you know, the less you know. You keep on learning, no matter how much we've learned already. There's always more, because spirit is unlimited. Spirit's always creating something new.
And it's the big fish in a small pond, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When we first start to get it, we go, "Oh wow, I'm the only one getting it," you know. and then we start to master our world, and then all of a sudden we realize, "Oh God, there's more depths to this than I realized before." And then all of a sudden you're a little fish in the big pond again, right?
Right.
And it's like that forever. You get to a level of growing. It's you know, our friend Mary Mandan Morrissey. I love the very simple way that she describes it. She says, you know, you can't expect a third grader, and we don't expect a third grader to get fourth grade curriculum.
Right.
You know, we're not handing a fourth grader Algebra 2 honors questions, right? I mean, the mind is not developed, is not ready to do that yet. Yes. However, if we educate, and educate has to do with caring, the word comes from educare, to deeply care, right? If we deeply care and educate people, the fourth grader learns the fourth grade stuff and then moves on to the fifth grade. And sure enough, by the time they're in seventh, eighth, ninth grade, they know what Algebra 2 honors is and what that all means. Mm-hmm. Right? You follow?
Yes.
It's the same thing in spiritual growth. You know, at first you get the idea that your thoughts are things, right? And I love all the work that's going on there now about thoughts are things. But we in New Thought have been teaching thoughts are things for 125 years, right? And that writings have been around. Those teachings have been around. And we take advantage of those people and started to learn that stuff. Well, now, what happens after thoughts are things? Oh, well, the mind acquires habits by repetition of thought. Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you know what else? So does the body. What? Yeah, we acquire habits by repetition of thought. Oh. And habits work for you automatically, don't they? Do any of you drink coffee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. Well, you do. I drink tea.
Right? So when I get up in the morning, what's the first thing I want?
Coffee. Absolutely, that's right.
Coffee,
mm-hmm.
Right?
The
coffee.
Habit.
We go looking for it, like a dog is looking for a fish or something, right? God dang, I'm in a hotel, there's no coffee in the room. We go find the coffee. Right?
Yes, that's so true.
We gave ourselves that habit, right?
Right.
Now, you can have good habits, you can have bad habits. I'm in the habit of making my bed. I'm in the habit of brushing my teeth. I'm in the habit of staying pretty clean, right? Well, those are good habits. Well, you can have bad habits too. But you got them the same way, by repetition of thought. And once you have them, they're installed. And you got to either be conscious of them and create new ones, right? You follow?
Yeah.
Or you'll be a victim of your own habits, right?
Absolutely.
Because people believe, you've heard that expression, same day, different stuff.
Right.
I mean, no, it's not the same day. It's a brand new day, loaded with infinite possibilities, and the amount of love and joy and goodness and laughter and possibility in any given day is completely unknown by you. But if you don't set yourself up for it, you're not even going to see it.
Right? And it can change in a nanosecond. Yeah. You can turn it around.
Don't the people who expect when they get out of bed, you live in New York City, you see this on the subways all the time. Mm-hmm. The people get out of bed, they expect a sucky day, and they expect to have a hard time with people.
Right.
And guess what they have?
Exactly that.
Right.
It's true.
That's exactly it.
You always get what you ask for.
So if you use those same mechanisms and turn them around into the direction of your dreams or the direction of your goals or the direction of what you'd actually like to do, you'd be headed the right way, yes?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. There's a book, I don't remember which one it is, but it always talks about this woman who had the boss from hell, and I always talk about this with my practitioner clients. And she just couldn't stand this boss, and he treated everybody horribly. And then she started to learn these principles. And she said, I have to find something good about him, but she couldn't find anything good about him. So he came in one day and he had a nice tie on. So she focused on his nice tie. And the next day she found some other little silly thing about him that was good. And after many months, all of a sudden, he started to act differently toward her. Not toward anybody else, but because she decided to change her thoughts about him, he reacted differently to her.
Yeah,
and we
exactly.
could all do that.
That's right. So now that's indicated because she was not conscious of all the things that were really happening in what we would call the metaphysics, in the invisible realms, behind that. But in fact, if she changed his attitude about him on her inside, and it affected him on the outside, doesn't that tell you something?
Yes.
Yeah.
About the power and the connectedness of all things. Yeah?
Right.
I love that story. And by the way, virtually every self-help book, or any self-help book, could absolutely have a chapter about the horrible boss.
Yes.
You can't believe how many times in my lifetime I've heard that chapter. Right? And had exactly the same experience, where you teach them a way to perceive it differently, a way to approach it from forgiveness and high love. And the next thing you know, the person is gone and you're up for the job. I mean, it's just amazing. Right? And you didn't do anything other than act in love and integrity. Right? Why? Because there's a power for good in the universe. And if you will cooperate with its nature, you'll watch it work. If you do not cooperate with its nature, it doesn't work. And that's just how it is. Right? It's like the principle of electricity in some way we can sort of see, right? It's invisible. You can't really see electricity, can you? You can't really see it, but you know it's there. And you can touch it, and if you touch it, you'll feel the effects of it, right? And the electricity can toast your toast, and the electricity can set your house on fire. And it doesn't really care which one. It's not the electricity. Electricity is a principle, but you're working with it either affirmatively or destructively. Do you see that?
Right.
Well, so is the law of mind. It's a principle in the universe. In fact, it underlies all things, but since it's a principle for good, you can only use it if you cooperate with its nature. Right? And that's like, it's like, I would like the water to run uphill, but it runs downhill. Yes, and if you use water running downhill, we can do very creative things with it. If you try to make the water run uphill, or you try to run up against the water, it's very ineffective.
Right.
Yeah?
Absolutely. And I know when we bring love to something, I know Karen talks about this a lot, about bringing love to a situation, that you can, as you always say, change it in a holy instant, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because, what it is one perceives and what you perceive about it, even if you know the story, right, your perception can change. Your perception about what it was can change. It's way too long a story to get in here now, but I'll just tell it simply. My grandfather, who's long since deceased, told me a joke a bunch of years ago, probably 33 years ago. I was driving down the freeway today. Something prompted a memory of my grandfather, and I repeated the joke, and for the first time in 35 years, I got it.
You've got it in 35 years.
I didn't even know it was a joke. I went, oh my God, he was being funny. Now, the interesting thing is, when that joke came to me, and I started laughing because I really did think it was profoundly funny, and then I thought it was even funnier that I didn't get it for all these years. It's been in my memory, and it came up like that. And then when I got it, out loud in my car, I said, nobody else in the car, I said, now that's very funny, Grandpa. And I got such what I call God bumps. It was almost like he was in the car with me. And it was so, now that's the spirit of life, and it is everywhere present, and it works on so many levels. But if I wasn't tuned into that love, right, do you think that any of that would have happened?
No.
Right? It's the atmosphere of love that allowed my grandpa to touch me from another dimension and make me laugh, actually make me laugh hysterically. That was pretty funny.
That was funny. And he's probably been whispering that joke in your ear every year.
It's
only now you realized it.
I just now got it. It's like, oh, I can't believe it. But you see, that's the wonderful thing, that the more we participate in what I call step one and step two. Now, you and I are Holmesian New Thought people, meaning we love the teachings of Ernest Holmes, and his great gift was this idea called spiritual mind treatment, which was a way to form prayers in the affirmative, right? And it's a very good technique. It's a wonderful technique, and it's available to anybody in the world. It's not a hidden thing or anything. And it's basically a way to talk to God. And in the way that we do that, we say, we become conscious in our own awareness. Step one. Step one is God is all there is, right? God's the infinite and everything seen and everything unseen. We get to know God is all there is. And then step two is that if God is all there is, I must be what that is, right? Isn't that true? Right. If God is all there is, and I must be whatever that is, yes? We're in agreement with that. I know you are all ministers in this, right? Yes, so we totally agree with that. Well, so here's what I believe. When you hang out in your awareness in step one and step two, you'll notice something very interesting. You begin to attract people in your experience who hang out in the awareness of step one and step two. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely.
In your own lives?
Definitely. Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
Now, I have over 5,000 friends on Facebook. And they're all, you know how they become my friends? Somehow I'm able to identify that they are step one and step two people.
I'm one of them.
And I say, if you're a step one and step two person, by law, you're automatically my friend. Do you see that? By cosmic law, you have to be my friend. Because it means we see that God is all there is and that harmony is at the center of the universe. Now, don't you think it's a good idea to have a lot of step one and two people all around the globe? And isn't that what's going to make the world a better place?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely. Definitely.
So, and when you hang out with step one and step two people, the boundaries between potential and kinetic, between waves and forms, between waves and particles, between energy and matter, the boundary line gets really thin. And we begin to actually understand in a very deep way that when I work within to create a mental image, to create an idea, as you're talking about, to imagine the way children imagine, to become fully immersed in 5 minutes of positive visioning about my own life, if I'm willing to do that and bring those images and colors to it, you will begin to find you start living those elements in your life.
Yes.
Right? And this is true of everyone. It's not, you don't have to be a New Thought person to know that this is how the universe works. But sooner or later, when you become someone who's in tune with the infinite or in tune with the universe itself, you find that they always believe in step one and step two. That they've been step one and step two people, whether they even knew what step one and step two was. Mm-hmm. You follow?
Yeah, absolutely.
You look at Peter Branson or some of these world-class wealthy people, multi-billionaires, and then you hear them talk, when some interviewer interviews them, and they're coming from a place of step one and step two. How can I be of service, and what are the ideas that are going to bring most life into humanity? Right. Wow. I mean, the only thing we would add to that is remember the earth is part of the deal too. So obviously we're supposed to bring life to both the earth and humanity. Right. Instead of what we've been doing throughout civilization, which is rob life from the earth. No, it's a circulating deal. You got to give back. But we're beginning to figure it out. And God knows the earth has been on our side, and she's been very patient, and we're beginning to figure it out. And we're doing our part as the world awakens.
Exactly.
So shows like this, become really important because somebody might get an idea that will help them.
I think we have to take a commercial break right now. We'll be right back with Dr. Harry. Thank you so much.
$1.3 million women are victims of physical assault by an intimate partner each year. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the majority of cases aren't reported to the police. Most people who are in an abusive relationship don't even know they're in one. The truth is, all abusive relationships boil down to one thing: control.
How do you like it? My new dress.
Are you out of your mind? You look like a prostitute. We're not going out with you dressed up like that in public.
But what am I supposed to wear?
Wear something decent. You can't wear that out in public. We're going to be late. Get back in there and pick a different outfit. I'm going to go run some errands. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Please be ready, okay?
Fine, I'll change. Fine.
Abuse is not always physical, leaving wounds that are visible on the outside. Emotional abuse is just as painful, only these wounds are hidden on the inside.
Are you out of your mind? You're crazy. You look like a prostitute.
Know that abuse is abuse, no matter what the form.
Look at me.
Oh my God, what's wrong with me?
Physical abuse scars the body.
I just wanted to love me.
But mental abuse scars the mind.
What you just saw was an example of a relationship that is emotionally abusive. Nobody has the right to tell you how to dress or how to act. If someone really cares for you, they won't tear you down. They will build you up.
How do you like it?
Wow. You look great. Fantastic. But then again, you look great all the time.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd like it. It's my new dress. I bought it just so we could go out tonight.
You look stunning.
Thank you. But I think I'm going to take a sweater just in case it gets cold tonight.
Great idea. I'm going to take one too. Let's go.
All relationships are not perfect, but a healthy relationship is when two people bring out the best in each other and have each other's good in mind. Take your time to know someone instead of rushing into something. It is better not to involve yourself with an abusive person than to try and get out of a domestic violence situation.
If someone is abusive to you and you need help, please call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-SAFE. They have highly trained experts available 24/7 who will speak with you confidentially and offer information regarding the unhealthy aspects of your relationship, resources, or immediate support for victims to find safety and live lives free of abuse. Domestic violence affects us all.
It affects us all.
Nos afecta a todos.
It affects us all.
모두에게 영향을 줍니다.
Che ci ricarte tutte.
It affects us all.
Domestic violence.
We're going to do a live commercial. Hi, I'm Renee Marie. I'm the president of Language of Love Incorporated Foundation. I'm really happy to tell you that we're going to be doing a Language of Love telethon on March 29, 2015 from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Please look for the location on my website, ReneeMarieLanguageOfLove.org. And once again, it's ReneeMarieLanguageOfLove.org. And the show will be hosted on the Madhouse TV. It really is important for you to be aware of strokes and aphasia. Strokes is the third leading cause of death in America and the first leading cause of disability. And it really is something that plays no favoritism. And it also really comes when you're not expecting. Nobody expects to have a stroke and nobody expects to suffer from aphasia. And it really does play a huge, making a huge impact in your life and change your life in one split second. So we look forward to having everyone join us once again on March 29th, 2015 from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. And you could follow us on ReneeMarieLanguageOfLove.org. Once again, it's ReneeMarieLanguageOfLove.org. And we look forward to seeing you. God bless. We're going to do a live.
Stretching under sedation or manipulation under anesthesia is a very gentle, very precise procedure to very slowly release any scar tissue that is formed as a result of a traumatic injury. Many people ask, how does this work? Will I get hurt? Will you stretch me too far? We only stretch the body part to its normal range of motion. After completing the post-MUA rehabilitation program, it's very common that our patients say to us, hey, I can play ball with my kid again. Hey, I can bowl again. Hey, I can enjoy hiking again. This is what makes it rewarding to us as practitioners.
Welcome back to Spirituality Rocks. So we're back here with Dr. Harry Morgan Moses and Reverend Karen Gigante, and it's the time that we talk about our affirmation. And an affirmation is a positive statement of your truth, your spiritual truth. And I loved one from Dr. Harry's book, and it says, beyond my expectations, there are infinite possibilities. And that's so true.
That's so true. Yeah.
And Reverend Karen is actually going to do an affirmative prayer for us, or what Dr. Harry talked about before is spiritual mind treatment. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Reverend Karen.
Okay. So maybe we'll all just take a deep breath and just know that with every breath, we honor the one perfect life that flows through all creation. We center ourselves in its radiance and allow it to stream through our mind and our consciousness, recognizing that God is the sole source, substance, and reality of all that is. We realize that we are surrounded by and immersed in God, and that this infinite creative intelligence is responding to our thoughts, our beliefs, and our attitudes each and every moment. United with this one love, one power, and the one source of all good, we open our hearts and minds to receive all we conceive. In recognition of this truth, we open our minds and imagination to express our heart's desires and to recognize, remembering that God is all there is. Infinite possibilities are part of the rich designs in our imaginations. Joy and happiness add more depth to our experiences, and a feeling of complete oneness with all life fills our soul. We bless everyone who crosses our pathway in thought and presence. We offer our love to all, and with great joy and gratitude, we release this treatment into the law, and so it is.
And so it is. Fantastic, beautiful, thank you. Thank you so much. You know, as far as that treatment, it was, you talked about our heart's desire. And Dr. Harry, you have in your book a story about a daisy that had a heart's desire.
Show everybody the book, if you will. I don't have it.
Oh, sorry, I do have it right here. Obvious Power.
Obvious Power. It's available at Amazon. It's available online everywhere. It's available in Kindle. If anybody's interested can find it. Look for Harry Morgan Moses or the book Obvious Power.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So what was your question? I apologize.
So that's okay. You have in the book a story about a daisy that had a heart's desire and felt that it could be more than what it already was.
Well, it's interesting. I wrote that story a number of years ago. And it's the opening story in the book, and it's about a daisy in a field of daisies who began to feel that it could be something more, that it was being limited by what all the other daisies said daisies could be and daisies could do. And it started to wonder about its own nature, and the story goes on, and it began to meditate on its own nature, began to contemplate its own nature, and then it began to imagine about what that could be. And of course, all the other daisies didn't like that. They thought that was not very daisy-like behavior, and they put it down and they said, "You're being a little too different." And daisies are meant to be together. We're not supposed to have special daisies. And this daisy kept meditating on its nature and what its possibility was. And one day, it grew 2 feet above all the other daisies, and it became 10 times its size. And then the younger daisies began to look at that new strange daisy, and they began to imagine that they could be like that too. And that's basically how transformation happens with everybody. And as I say, in other words, we begin to get a conception, as you just said in your beautiful treatment there, your beautiful affirmative prayer, we can achieve what we can conceive, right? So as soon as the mind begins to conceive it, and then you talked about it again in the very first part of the show, which is what is that power that we have as small children to imagine so in depth, to go so deep into our imagination, right? Well, what we now know is going deep into imagination is a creative force. It's a very powerful force. And what you go deep in there and find is what you begin to attract into your life, right?
Right.
So, and since I wrote that story, the field of quantum mechanics and quantum science has developed quite a bit in that 10 years since I wrote that story. Is only a story in the book. And we now know, and science now agrees, that DNA is malleable, meaning it's flexible, it can be changed, and it's malleable to consciousness. What they're finding out that everything is formed from the DNA, and we thought, well then, so for example, modern allopathic medicine says, oh, well, 90% of your health is born from your genetics. Well, now the new science says that's not so, because you can change the DNA at the level of consciousness, meaning at the level where you begin to think and meditate and dwell upon whatever it is you seek to become, right? You can become that. And that's, of course, the theory in spiritual healing, and it's why we know it works, right? The doctors say, well, here's the math, and we say, well, here's the spiritual truth.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And we're not arguing with your math. We're just saying there's a spiritual truth behind the math. If we get in touch with that spiritual truth, we can change the math. Right? So if the math is, your blood count is funny, well, nobody's arguing. If your science and your facts are your blood count is off, well, then that's the fact. But the truth is you're born in the image and likeness of wholeness. And if I meditate on that image and likeness of wholeness and what it is to be one with the divine that is whole, complete, and perfect, and if I call that into my human form and into my expression, and if I do that on a regular basis, you will change the blood count. Right?
Absolutely.
Now, they say, well, you could change the blood count by diet and exercise. Yes, but they also say it may or may not work. But if you do mental work, spiritual work, and diet and exercise, it's almost guaranteed to work 100% of the time.
Right.
So we now have data, scientific data in the field that says the things that we're talking about in this show, building a consciousness by means of your thoughts and attitudes, is the most important work a human being can do. And yet, we're not practicing that in the world yet, because we have all of these old belief systems still present in the world. You understanding that? So that's why it's been said that new science advances at the rate which old scientists die off.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
They're holding an old idea in place even in the face of a new idea. And until they actually, because now the new people are now holding the new idea. So you need the old people to get out, so the new people are the majority, so the critical mass will actually change.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that's the work that we're involved in on the planet right now. And all three of us and our beloved Dr. Janine Burns, we're all very much involved in changing the consciousness of the planet. How? By helping people realize who and what they are and coming into the law of harmony. Right? Because I don't know about you, but I mean, I see all of this stuff and I listen to all of these speakers and all of this talk, and I go, well, then don't you see, if anything that we're saying is true, then war, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And killing everybody off and each other off doesn't make sense. It's scientifically crazy.
Absolutely.
Why are we doing it? It's not spiritual anymore. We know there's only one energy. Energy can't be attacking itself and think it's going to grow. That's called cancer.
Right.
That's what a cancer cell is. It's a disoriented cell that attacks itself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's an opportunity for us through means of our passion, through means of our dressing up and showing up, through means of our doing things like this, for means of every client you talk to in your center, for means of anybody you get to go to a center to spiritual living or to walk into a New Thought church, you have an opportunity to help the world become a better place.
Yes.
And I think we should get to it.
I think we're doing that right now. Right? I always was interested in healing, and I learned an energy-based healing. And I did that for many years, and it helped a lot of people, and I certainly believe in it. But then I read a book by Joel Goldsmith called Infinite Supply, and he talked about healing, and he talked about healing through the consciousness. And it was like somebody came along and just took me and shook me, and I realized this is the most permanent way of healing, is to do that through your consciousness. That everything else can work, but as you said, Dr. Harry, that's what's going to work all the time.
Well, like I say, the quantum mechanics says exactly what we've been saying. It says there's a unified field, and something happens in the unified field, and it moves from potential, which is waves, into particles, which is the beginning of matter. Mm-hmm. Electrons is the smallest particle, which then forms atoms, neutrons, electrons, and molecules go on to build the universe, right? But the actual change is when it moves from potential, which is a wave, into that first particle, which is an electron. And now, this was the theory that was there during Dr. Holmes' time. Remember, Dr. Holmes died in 1960. Mm-hmm. So this was being revealed and studied in 1942, certainly not part of the dominant paradigm. Yet everything Dr. Holmes was writing about in mystical or spiritual terms matches exactly what the quantum scientists were saying. Now you go forward, and there's a great New Thought book called The Prosperity Bible, has 17 or 18 different New Thought authors from the turn of the century, and they're all talking about exactly the same thing. And they were in different places in the country and different places on the planet, and there was no internet and no way for them to be connected. But they all wrote about the same things. And the things that they wrote about now, since 1940, we're talking 60, 75 years later, the science that they said is the way the universe works, the most advanced science on the planet we have agrees with them now. And says, oh, well, this is the way it works. And what they say, what quantum science says, is consciousness acting upon the field creates the movement. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, where does consciousness come from? Doesn't it come from you and from me? Right?
Yes.
I'm the place where consciousness is. Well, then, according to what modern science says, I'm the one that moves energy into matter. And everyone is, by the way. Mm. That's why the guy who proclaims every day, my life sucks, and everybody I meet is going to be a jerk, goes out in the world and accomplishes just that, because he turned that into his reality, right? And the same person who goes in, it's a good day, I think I'll prosper in great and wonderful ways and encounter great and wonderful souls, mm-hmm. That's exactly what happens to them, right?
Right.
How does that work? Well, people say to me, well, that's easy for you to say. Well, I've been challenged in every area there is. I've been challenged in health, I've been challenged in money, I've been challenged in relationship, I've been challenged in purpose, I've been challenged across the board. And I have found that I found a principle on which I could rely, which not only moved me from whatever holes or pits or dis-ease or mistakes I was involved in, it has moved me into a way of living which is beginning to reveal to me the kingdom in earth, in my life experience. This idea that I have to die to go to heaven is just ridiculous.
Yeah, a friend of mine said to me,
the teacher said, behold, it's at hand. Well, then if it's at hand, you don't have to die to get there.
Right. A friend of mine said to me one day, and this was a psychologist, she said, what you do is an awful lot of work. And I said, well, what's the alternative? To live that sucky life that you were talking about with the man that said, my life is horrible. And
the awful lot of work, at first, what we call that stinking thinking, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
At first when people are waking up and they realize what kind of stinking thinking has been going through their head, and they try to fix it, it is a lot of work. I mean, because you didn't have any idea you spent so long being that negative and creating things in the wrong direction.
Right.
Right. So at first it's a lot of work, but then we get into this thing that you and I we were all three talking about earlier, which is you start falling into your heart, and we don't expect that when that happens. I don't think. It's just something happens in our heart, and we realize, oh God, this being connected to everybody is not in my imagination. It's actually happening. I'm actually, and so I find, it's a pretty extraordinary thing when you can look at the attendant at the 7-Eleven store from a place of unconditional love, and he doesn't know why he's smiling so brightly when you look at him. And it's just because you're seeing him a certain way.
True.
And when you can begin to walk that way, it's not hard at all. It becomes easy. Right? So yes, and yet I say that when I travel around the country and indeed internationally, and to all people who know these ideas, I always say, there's a huge difference between knowing these ideas or knowing about these ideas and practicing them.
Absolutely.
There's a big gap right there, huh?
And it's when you practice it, you can know it up here. It's when you practice it, it comes in here.
Correct.
That's when things start to change, and you start attracting more and more people that are in that 1 and 2 step of the treatment.
Yes,
and other people tend to fall away. You don't even have to do anything. They won't be in your lives anymore.
It does. It's amazing. And so, one of the reasons you say, well, so for me, I have a daily spiritual practice. And for me to get out of bed, and I teach in my own ministry everywhere, don't get out of bed until you can greet the day. Right? So, people say, oh, well, when I have to pee. I said, well, then you pee in an affirmative attitude and then get back in bed until you can greet the day.
There you go.
I meditate in the morning, so I consider that part of before I get out of bed. I meditate in the morning, and I establish a good solid affirmation before I even come around to doing my visioning work for the day. And so I would say, for me to get out the door, it takes half an hour of spiritual practice. Well, say, well, that seems like a lot of work. Well, a half hour of spiritual practice is leading me into a life of wonder and amazement and love. I think it's worth it.
I think so too.
I'd say so.
It heads off a lot of problems if you start out the day that day.
and then you talk about what the book is all about, habits and attitudes, and then you realize, if I establish habits by the repetition of thought, what if I start getting some really positive attitudes and habits already in my mind, already in who I am, right? Well, then I just start living by those already installed habits and attitudes, right?
Right.
I expect a greater good. I look for a greater good. I look for joy. I look for laughter. I look for love. I expect it. I expect to be greeted. I expect to sit in the best tables. I expect to drive the nicest cars. I expect it to be beautiful wherever I am. And you know what? Most all the time it is. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm a human being learning about the divinity that within me, which is the ultimate divinity of God. And I got a full lifetime to work on it. And if I'm not done in this lifetime, I'll work on it in the next one. But boy, what a nice path.
That's true. And it's that expectation that draws it to you.
To genuinely expect a greater good. And to genuinely expect solutions to life's problems. And to genuinely expect that we can put an end to war. And that we can clean up the environment. And we can live in harmony with the earth. I'm expecting this on behalf of my grandchildren, for goodness sakes. And I'm going to teach them to expect it for theirs. So that's the way we got to grow things forward.
And I think that's what's the only way it's going to change is when everybody says, oh, things are getting worse, things are getting worse. If we can stay steadfast in our faith and our truth, believe me, we're going to overcome all of that.
If you begin to take this in, so like I said, we talk about people who listen to it and people who practice it, right? So if you just decide, I'm going to start practicing this thing. I'm going to go to Center of Spiritual Living right there in Long Beach, and I'm going to learn. I don't know what you guys are all talking about. I want to learn some techniques, because that's a very good way to do it, is go among other souls who are seeking to wake up. Right. That's a good way to learn things, right? So and there's something very valuable about being live in the room with other people who are seeking what you're seeking, right? Which is self-awareness and discovering the goodness of life, right? That's a good crowd to hang out with, and that will get you into good practices. And good practices will then allow your life to start to change. And you'll start to see that if you have the power to help change your life for the better, you probably have the power to help change the rest of the world's life for the better.
Right.
And it begins with, how are you going to have peace on earth? Even the Dalai Lama, bless his heart, just said this a few weeks ago. Dalai Lama said, how are you going to have peace on earth unless you have peace in your own heart? And until the people protesting for peace have peace in their own heart, we're never going to have peace on earth, right?
Exactly.
We have to be peaceful in order to manifest peace.
Absolutely. I am so thrilled that you were here with us today, Dr. Harry. Karen, I know, is thrilled also. We could stay with you for another 3 hours, right? We really could.
And we wouldn't have to say a word.
But I love it. But please, everyone, get Dr. Harry's book. You'll learn so much from this book on how to change your life. And as Dr. Harry said, you can help to change other people's lives. Just want to let you know that Dr. Janine will be back next week. She has some wonderful guests coming up. Next week, Heather Harder, author of Principles to Guide You to Inner Peace, and Michael Posner, author of Well Adjusted. The following week, on the 26th, Sheila McKeithen, president of the Universal Foundation for Better Living and author of 12 Steps to Your Healing, Be Still and Know, Volume 1. And on April 2nd, Don Mardak, American entrepreneur, author, and mystic. Karen, thank you so much for being here with me today. We're kind of spiritual sidekicks along with Barbara, right? And we always have fun together knowing the truth. We're always so glad to have Dr. Harry, and we didn't really flirt enough with you today, Dr. Harry. So we're going to have you back again to do that. Is there one last little thing you'd like to leave us with? We have 1 more minute.
Me? Oh.
Yeah, well, you.
Yeah, I end my talks every Sunday, and they're online at myspiritworks.com. I always say, wherever you are in your spiritual journey, I want you to know, whether you're facing the deepest challenge you've ever faced, or whether you're looking at a greater opportunity than you've ever had before, everything is going to work out just fine.
I love it.
And by fine, I mean like fine watches and fine cars and fine trips and fine love and fine sex and fine food. I'm talking fine. Everything's going to work out just fine. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and all your soul, and everything will work out just fine.
And that was the best advice.
Perfect way to end this.
And we thank you all for being here. Please join us again next week. We're always loving to see everyone. Thank you so much. And we say goodnight, and don't forget that spirituality rocks.
Give my regards to Broadway.
We will.
Bye for now.
Bye now.